All right, folks, it is 2:45 and welcome back to the Mid-Atlantic Marine Debris Summit. Hopefully you all can hear me okay. So it's been a wonderful summit. It's been a wonderful day so far. We've learned a ton about the massive problem that is marine debris. And we really wanted to make sure our final portion of this summit highlighted programs and strategies that people are utilizing to combat this global issue. So in this next session, we have a lot of really exciting speakers here to talk about effective community engagement approaches, community science opportunities and programs, how some small businesses are approaching the reduction of plastics, and finally about the hot topic of behavior change through community-based social marketing. I think behavior change is something I've heard a ton of presenters talk about throughout their presentations during this summit. So I'm very excited to take a deeper dive into that. But to start off our conversation today, it is truly my great pleasure to introduce Curtis Bennett, the Director of Equity and Community Engagement at the National Aquarium located in Baltimore, Maryland, USA. Curtis and his team develop long-lasting relationships with local residents and stakeholders and collaborate with them to develop environmental programs and projects that meet the needs of the community. Curtis also ensures that the aquarium intentionally integrates and applies principles of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice within its conservation mission. Really welcome, Curtis. We're so happy to have you here. Go ahead and turn on your camera. I'm sorry if I'm not seeing you. Let me see. Okay. Curtis, are you with us? Wonderful, there you are, great.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Avalon, and for the introduction, and just really, really excited to be with you all this afternoon. I'm gonna start by sharing my screen. And I hope everyone can see that okay. Please let me know if it's not working. Again, my name is Curtis Bennett, Director of Equity and Community Engagement at the National Aquarium in Baltimore, Maryland. And I really wanted to take some time to chat really about this idea of a community engagement ethos. That when we think about community engagement, it goes so much more beyond a project, a program, an initiative, a department, a staff member, a position. This is really about a shift in thinking about not only what we do, but how we go about doing it. And I wanted to start off just by sharing a little bit more about me and my story. Storytelling is really such a critical part of engagement. It's really how we connect in really powerful ways to one another. And taking the time to understand someone's story, understanding the things that are important to them, the things that they value, really help develop those transformational relationships that are so critical to sustaining community engagement work. So for me, this connectivity to the environment, to nature, really started as a very young kid. And for as long as I can remember, I've always felt this sense of wonder and awe when being outside. And even to this day, I can watch the same bird doing the same things that birds do each and every day, and I still feel that sense of magic and wonder. And, it's always been a space where I can de-stress. So even today, right, whenever I feel stressed or feel anxious, like I'm always going outside, and instantly that stress is gone. And so, for me, as I was developing my own personal and unique connection to the natural world around me, I started to think more as I was matriculating through my career that, how do we continue to create opportunities and co-create those and co-design those opportunities with all individuals, such that each and every person can have their own unique, relevant and relatable experience, an opportunity to engage in the outdoors in a way that's most meaningful and impactful for them. I've always thought this idea, there's no such thing as universal relevancy. So the connections that we hold, the things that we value, the things that resonate with us are incredibly unique to each and every one of us. And you can't do this alone. So, this is all about building community. And for me, I know I wouldn't be the person or the professional I am today with so many mentors, friends, colleagues, peers. And this is just even a snapshot of those individuals. The people who have taken the time to take me under their wing, the people who have, really taught me so much, and really continue to challenge me to continue to be the best person and professional that I want to be for myself. And and I was actually texting a community member in South Baltimore the other day who I was on a panel with last week, and just sharing how much I valued her and her team for, we continue to uplift and support one another. This work isn't easy. It can oftentimes be very mentally and emotionally draining and taxing, but so rewarding at the same time. And especially true when we take the time to intentionally support one another and uplift one another to be the best people and organizations that we can be. So I wanted to start us off by thinking about what community is. Community can really be a very loaded term. And, it's really important to understand that, community, we can reference a place or a space physically, geographically. We can be thinking about affinity or interests that groups have. And lastly, we can also be thinking critically about identities that we hold. And so what's also important to note is that there is a very intersectional or interconnected nature of these. And so it's very dynamic, and especially, at the individual levels as well. And so I wanted to share an example of how these things play out. In the image that's right under the title, What is Community? You see that area that's outlined in red or orange. That's the Masonville Cove watershed, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. And this watershed, a place in and of itself geographically, actually spans two jurisdictions, Baltimore City and Anne Arundel County. So you can imagine that there might be some differences in experiences based on whether you're in Anne Arundel County or Baltimore City. And then on top of that, some of the imagery that you see here, these represent places of gathering, places of hope that community residents have really outlined and helped really create this asset map, essentially. So you see like churches and the faith community represented. You see schools, so the school community, recreation centers. So it really ties into that interest space. And then you have identity. So one really good example of this is we have now partnered with a faith-based institution, the Pathway Church of God, now for probably 10 plus years. Within this one congregation, you have residents that are identified as white and are mostly English speaking. And you have residents that are identified as Latino and or Hispanic that are mostly Spanish speaking. And as these congregations that occupy the same interest area, but also a similar geographic area, continue to connect with one another, there was this realization of differencing of experiences. And what that meant in terms of how to engage with groups in a really effective manner that really meets groups where they are based on those interests and needs. And then also, I think it's important to really build the distinction between engagement and outreach. You need both to really build the rapport and the connections. But for us, we really do want to focus on that engagement, that listening to people so we understand what those needs and interests are, what's most important to people. But the outreach is really critical for us as well at the National Aquarium for work in South Baltimore. Oftentimes groups are very much aware of the work that we do in the Inner Harbor, in our building, the animals that are in our care. But oftentimes, one of the things we found out when we first started doing this work in South Baltimore was not as many people knew about the conservation work that we were doing, especially the work beyond our gates in the Inner Harbor in Baltimore. And so really creating an opportunity to say that, hey, we do have this expertise, we do have this experience that can, wanting to work with people, working with partners in South Baltimore to continue to meet those needs. What's also important is that we really wanted to take the time to build transformational relationships, moving at the speed of trust. We understand that, some of the historical mistrust that so many communities face and have experienced when engaging with organizations. So many communities have been promised X and Y was done, promise Y and Z happened, or promise X, Y, and Z and nothing happened. And so for us, it was really continuing to take the time to build the rapport, build the relationships that would ultimately sustain the collective efforts in South Baltimore. And in fact, as I mentioned earlier, it's something that we really are wanting to continue to work on across the organization, to continue to build this organizational ethos around community engagement, where again, we turn outward, really being informed to what's important and what matters to to the surrounding communities. We want to listen attentively, really centering the lived experiences and voices of community partners. Again, moving at the speed of trust, building those transformational relationships, applying a co-creation and co-design method that really centers community agency, community ownership, and then also centering equity and inclusion, which I'll talk about in a second. And then there's this internal function of this work where, we have to look in the mirror as an organization and think critically about what shifts we may need to make in order to best show up externally in the way that we would want to achieve the collective impact that we want to achieve, which is really, really critical to this work as well. And as I mentioned earlier, we really do want to think critically about equity, inclusion, diversity, and justice, starting with inclusion being what we do. Equity is really about how we go about doing it. Cultural competence, or this, is really about what we need to do it well. And then when we think about it from a systems level and a sustainability level, that allows us to better sustain diversity, justice, and cultural relevancy. This is also about partnerships. Partnership is leadership. And this mindset of building constellations, not stars, as part of the article referenced below, has really stood out to me for the last several years when I heard this author speak. And it really talks about really the interconnectedness of not only us as organizations and people, but also the interconnectedness of the issues that we face. And that ultimately, and especially when we think about historical inequities across systems, these are inherently intertwined and interconnected. It's going to take all of us across many different organizations, sectors, and spaces to not only dismantle these inequitable systems, but to rebuild them in a way that is both equitable and just. And so it's always important that we are, when we're thinking about community, that we're a part of something bigger, a part of a bigger whole, that when we work together, larger impact can occur in a sustained way. And I wanted to give a bit of a case study for some work that the National Aquarium has been doing at the Masonville Cove Urban Wildlife Refuge and the surrounding communities of South Baltimore. Masonville Cove is one of the nation's first urban wildlife refuge partnerships as part of a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service urban wildlife conservation program. This partnership just celebrated last year its decade of dedication. So 10 years of really transformational work in the South Baltimore area. We like to refer to this as a story that's not fully written yet. So we feel like the best years are even still coming along. And at the bottom below, you see the individual partners represented, including the Maryland Port Administration at the state level as part of the Maryland Department of Transportation, Living Classrooms Foundation, a nonprofit based in Maryland, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the National Aquarium. And it truly is a gem in South Baltimore. Incredible things are happening at Masonville Cove and in the surrounding communities. This is an area that historically used to be accessible as a beach location for the communities in South Baltimore. Over time, as industry came and went within the area, Masonville Cove kind of became a bit of a dumping ground for large-scale debris. It became overrun with invasive species and non-native species. And so what happened is through remediation efforts and restoration efforts led by the Maryland Department of Transportation, Maryland Port Administration, and the partners listed in the prior slide, and community partners, of course, at the center of all of this, Masonville was really created back to this naturalized green space that, the community members wanted this connection back to the water. And so, this is a really great story of, wildlife thriving here, including a nesting pair of bald eagles. This is the home now of one of Baltimore's 4 trash wheels, Captain Trash Wheel is pictured here, and a site of several different programs and projects and efforts, from community science-based efforts, debris cleanups, habitat restoration, and so on and so forth. But how did all of this work really begin? So again, we start about trying to figure out what the needs and interests of the South Baltimore community residents and stakeholders, what are those needs? And it started out with the development of a Masonville Cove Small Watershed Action Plan. This was a 2+ year effort, even before my time at the aquarium, to really understand what were some of those challenging environmental issues that needed to be tackled. Things that we heard from community partners and residents included flooded streets due to clogged storm drains, issues with rats, a huge issue with plastic pollution and trash, and especially bulk illegal dumping. And then also the availability, maintenance, and connectivity of local green spaces. And so this partnership also involved several city agencies, including the Department of Planning, Department of Public Works, and Baltimore City as well. So again, the diversity of partners and stakeholders at the table to come up with innovative solutions to some of these challenges that these particular geographic communities were facing. And with this Small Watershed Action Plan came co-created and co-designed solutions. And I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking through this co-design process. It really does start with community demand. There has to be interest in that is being led and driven by community partners and stakeholders. So for example, in the top image, you'll see it's a picture of an alley art effort to redesign and repurpose an alley that had been a hotspot for illegal bulk dumping and littering as well, to really remake it. Redesign it as a place where students and kids in the community can play. And also we can work to deter that illegal dumping. At the completion of that particular project, there were actually several other alleys in South Baltimore where artwork was applied for very similar purposes. And again, this idea of autonomy and efficacy, there has to be that ownership of an effort, right? That regardless of expertise, age, et cetera, that people can really be a part of these efforts moving forward. And what does this look like in some of the various projects that we've been able to work through? So number one, you see this integration with art. Whether that's storm drain paintings, other murals that the community members and students have done and created. And this is coming from me as someone who I consider myself a for effort with art. Execution, personally leaves a lot to be desired. But I do understand the value of art as a means to storytell, as a means to connect, as a means to engage. And people really gravitate to it. And it's become such an important component of the work that we do. So as you can see, working with students to think critically about the messaging to prevent littering in their community, in their streets, preventing trash from going through those storm drains. You also see efforts that involve community cleanups, those solutions that had been identified, again, dating back to that Small Watershed Action Plan. We've also had a chance to do several community-based workshops on plastic pollution, on various behavior change efforts, just related to any number of topics in South Baltimore, from green space creation. We also talk about various components or aspects of these issues, including some of the public health connections to the plastic pollution problem as well. And those are done a lot with partners. So in one of the prior slides, you might have seen an individual dressed in what would be described as a dress made of trash. One of our great partners, Bridget Parlato, dresses up as the Recite Queen and gives presentations and talks to all types of audiences to continue to really provide those resources to address the plastic pollution issue. The other thing I want to mention here too is, and it's not pictured, is really the importance of relevancy. One of the partners that we've been able to engage with is a group of high school students called Baltimore Beyond Plastics. This group of students and just amazing young people played such a pivotal role in the ultimate creation of policy in Baltimore City that bans styrofoam. So just an incredible group of young people that it just did some transformational work. And we worked with them when we were engaging a local high school in South Baltimore. And I can recall the students listening to the talk by these students from Baltimore Beyond Plastics. And the students in the audience at one point, some of them would raise their hand and they would say, wait a minute, you all are in high school? And the presenters would say, yep, absolutely. And then the students in the audience would say, wait a minute, and you're doing all of this in Baltimore City? And the presenters are nodding their head, yep. And again, the students in the audience asking, so we can do this too? And the presenters saying, absolutely. That's a really powerful moment of relevancy of this work. Students knowing and understanding and having this agency that they know they can make a difference, and also knowing how they can go about doing it. So, as I conclude my talk this afternoon, wanted to end with some closing reflections. When we think about this work moving forward, whether that's in your own organization, coalition, partnerships, etc., think about what are the bright spots, what's going well, and why are those things going well? Because those are things that we can continue to build on. What are those sticky spots? The things that we feel really challenged, right? Where we maybe hit a wall, run into some tape a little bit, and don't really know how to move forward. What's some of the low-hanging fruit? Some of those strategies that we could easily implement moving forward. And then let's think critically about where we need future support and resources. We really do have to continue to work collaboratively, working together, to really tackle an issue as big as marine debris, as plastic pollution. It's going to take all of us learning from one another, growing together, and again, working hand in hand. And so with that, I just wanted to again take the time to say thank you to everyone for being here this afternoon, and excited for the panel discussion later. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Curtis. What a wonderful reflection of the work that you're doing in Baltimore. Thank you for sharing that with us. Yes, and as Curtis alluded to, we will have a question and answer session at the end of this, after the remainder of our speakers speak. And you can please enter your questions into the Q&A box. Please enter it in the Q&A, not in the chat. That would be great. Thank you so much. All right. Next up, I would like to introduce Hilary Burgess, who is the Marine Debris Monitoring Coordinator of the NOAA Marine Debris Program. Hilary leads the Marine Debris Monitoring and Assessment Project. Prior to her work with NOAA, Hilary's career focused at the intersection of science and public engagement through citizen science. We love citizen or community science. Welcome, Hilary. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really thrilled to be here. I'm going to provide an overview of NOAA's Marine Debris Monitoring and Assessment Project. But first, just a little more about me. I joined the Marine Debris Program just a little less than a year ago to support our national monitoring efforts. And again, my background and my passion is about public engagement in science, which is sometimes referred to as community science, sometimes referred to as citizen science. And I'm just excited to share with you about our work. So let me get my screen going. All right. So the Marine Debris Monitoring and Assessment Project, or MDMAP, Some of you may be familiar with this. It's NOAA's national monitoring program that functions primarily as a citizen or community science initiative. We engage partners and volunteers in conducting robust and rigorous shoreline surveys using a standard methodology and protocols to document the quantity and types of debris items that are greater than 2.5 centimeters. So large marine debris that's like a bottle cap or larger over time. And we have a number of goals that drive this project. The main one is to detect and document the amount and type of debris on shorelines and to see if those are differing over time or by geography. So NOAA basically uses these data to keep the pulse on the issue, but actions can result from the data at any scale by anyone. Examples could include identifying hotspots or specific sources of marine debris and then devising activities around those. We want to facilitate a network of folks that can contribute and make use of the data set themselves, including to inform policy to address the issue. But most importantly, I think, is to provide tools for partners to be able to leverage and meet their own goals and ask their own questions at local scales, including for prevention and management of the issue. Overall, we want to provide great data and information that can be used to evaluate and prevent marine debris. So the project is 10 years old. I'm coming in kind of midstream here. In recent years, a lot of effort has gone into both evaluating the data and ensuring that it is well suited to address these goals, but also the program and the ways that we're meeting our stakeholders' needs. And so starting in 2017, this included a partnership with the Ocean Conservancy and the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organization, a group out of Australia, to analyze the first 5 years of data and the methods that we were using. And then around that time, an effort was also undertaken to interview stakeholders, both data users and volunteers and participants and partners, to understand what was working and what wasn't, and then use that to inform kind of a new iteration of the project. And that's what I've been involved in the last year, and what we're working on in the coming year as well. And I'm going to describe some of these exciting developments that came out of that. But first, I want to highlight how essential partnerships are in this project. So the value of this effort really lies in the collective contributions of many individual efforts. So I loved Curtis's analogy of constellations, not stars. It's exactly how this network functions. And people that engage with MDMAP are a mix of their individuals, families that are doing it as a family activity, organizations that pair it with regular beach cleanups and volunteer events, teachers working with students, other agencies and academic institutions who are using it to carry out research, sometimes through engagement with students or other members of their communities. So it's a tool that's used, again, to carry out goals of other organizations and individuals. And the collective could not exist without them. We would not have these data without them. And so we're grateful for their time and contributions to the effort. And for those of you out there who have been part of it at different points, thank you very much. This is just a set of examples of folks that have been involved in organizations that are involved. It's by no means comprehensive. So MDMAP to date, so it launched in 2011. There have been 443 sites, over 9,000 surveys in 10 countries. The international interest in using this methodology to detect trends is increasing so that we can compare apples to this global issue around the world. And there just are a variety of ways that the data are used, both by NOAA, but also because the data set is open and accessible to anyone by other researchers. So it's grown primarily to date through word of mouth. And the data, again, have been used in a lot of really interesting ways. So I want to share a few of those with you. The first is highlighting the value of baseline information. So when we know how much marine debris we expect to see in a given place and time, we can measure change against that. And one example is the Tohoku earthquake that happened in 2011 in Japan resulted in an estimated 1.5 million tons of floating tsunami debris that made its way into the Pacific Ocean and then was floating around. And researchers were able to document that there was a 10-fold increase in the amount of debris washing up in Washington state. So really measuring the impact of that event on those coastal communities. And Washington state was the only state that had pre-tsunami data that existed that could be used to compare. So it really highlighted the value of having that kind of ongoing monitoring, keeping the pulse. So there's this 10-fold increase. Data are also used to evaluate the effectiveness of existing policies and then make the case for adopting them in other places. So one example here is that study I mentioned that involved the CSIRO and Ocean Conservancy looked at MDMAP data and International Coastal Cleanup data and compared the proportion of container marine debris, so that as an item in surveys, in coastal states that did and didn't have container deposit legislation. So what they found, surprise, is that states that do have container deposit legislation, so a small economic incentive to properly dispose of beverage bottles and containers, had a 40% reduction or less amount of that related debris on those sites. So, and you can see that here. So the sites in green have a smaller proportion of containers than the sites in the states in blue. So something to think about. Another example of the way that data can be, this kind of work can be used at kind of the community local level, is to understand local sources and inform action related to those. So I think you've already heard from Nancy and Christy about efforts to track balloon litter and use those data in the Mid-Atlantic. But here's an example that uses a similar approach where debris were quantified, they identified a top item with a clear source, and then used that to make the case for prevention. So here in California, in the Bay Area, where the Greater Farallones National Marine Sanctuary is, they carried out MDMAP surveys over many years at these 6 beaches. And what you're looking at are pie charts of the proportion of top contributing items to what they saw. And at all sites, one of the top items they found was shotgun wads and shells. And for those unfamiliar with what those are, they're the packaging that shotgun ammunition comes in, and it gets dispersed when the gun is fired along with the shot itself. So there are the plastic casing and then this wad as well. And this type of gun and ammunition is used in waterfowl hunting. So the folks involved in doing these surveys noticed this trend and developed an idea to engage the hunting community in preventing this type of debris. So they actually applied for and received funding from NOAA's Marine Debris Program to pilot a behavior change campaign that they ended up conducting in partnership with the hunting community. So they conducted interviews, and then they co-designed this campaign, signage. They had these contests of you vote for your favorite waterfowl by disposing of your shotgun wads in one or the other containers, and then they evaluated the effectiveness of the campaign. And they just very recently, it's super hot off the presses, is a great report that's available on our website that describes the lessons that they learned, kind of the successes and the challenges, and provides a roadmap for conducting other kinds of projects that follow a similar model. So I encourage folks to check that out. So what is involved in doing an MDMAP survey? So how do we get these great data that we can do so much with? It involves selecting a 100-meter section of beach, and that same section is returned to over time. So each time a survey is conducted, we go back to the same 100-meter beach, which can be a shoreline of the outer coast, or it can be an estuary. It can be done on rivers, anywhere where there's a beach that's either rocky or sandy, so large bodies of water. During each survey, we actually search for and count the marine debris items we find in just a subset of areas, smaller areas called transects, and I'm going to show you what that looks like in just a second. And we record information about the conditions of the shoreline, as well as documenting the item type and material of what we find. And then those data are entered into a database, and we repeat. We encourage monthly surveys, but it's not required. So here's an example survey. Here's a 100-meter shoreline, and then these 5-meter wide transects that run perpendicular to the water. And each time a random set of these is surveyed, where the debris are counted and photographed. And we have kind of a standard set of material and item types that we categorize everything according to on a survey. It was designed to be comparable to international and monitoring efforts around the world, informative of the sources and uses of the items that are found, so to help us identify prevention activities, and then succinct enough to be applied consistently. But we also provide an option to add custom items that are subcategories of the main categories, so that items of local concern or interest can also be tracked. So maybe there's something that folks are finding in Delaware that would not be found in California because of a local fishing or aquaculture activity, that could be added as a subcategory and tracked. You can see examples of those here that are used frequently on the West Coast. So data can be entered, they can be collected using paper data sheets, or they can be entered directly into a mobile phone or through a browser website, which is linked there, and you can actually check it out without an account. So paper or mobile, choose your own adventure. But once data enter the database, they are freely accessible and available to anyone without a login. And we have done a bunch of work in the last year to add tools that allow folks to use the data right away. So one way is through these cool new data visualizations that I'm super excited about, is to look at trends in quantity over time. And this is looking at items per 100-meter length of shoreline. You get a timeline along the length. Oh, And this can be looked at for all debris or by a specific type. So this will allow us to look at before and after an intervention, like a bag ban, or an outreach or behavior change campaign targeting a particular type of debris, like shotgun debris or balloons, or a natural disaster, like before and after the tsunami that I showed you earlier. And this can be looked at for a single site or for a selection of sites to see how one place compares to another. The other cool tool that we now have at our fingertips is composition. So similar to the pie charts that I showed you that had shotgun wads as a top item, we can look at material and item type in these pie charts at the survey level. So what did I find today? Can be viewed at the site level. So what do I typically find at my site? Or what do I find most at my beach? Or across a selection of sites. So what do we see the most in Delaware? What do we see the most in Virginia? How does that compare to what's seen in Florida? And so you don't need fancy statistical tools or skills in order to be able to access this information about the data that folks are contributing. You don't even need to log in anymore. So that's something we're really thrilled about. The ways to get involved in the effort: restart surveys that have historically monitored inactive sites. So they're sort of a pause on MDMAP and recruiting folks to get involved when NOAA was doing the evaluation that I mentioned of the project. And as we were kind of launching the new website and there's a new survey guide. So there's inactive sites, and we'd love to get those restarted. There's also the option to start a new site entirely. The main steps are check out the survey guide that's on the website or in the toolbox on the website, and create an account and get going, and then use me as a resource. I can provide virtual trainings and help you get started. So hope folks will consider that. Here's my email address and the link to the monitoring toolbox, which has resources for getting started. And we're going to continue to be building that out based on feedback and input from folks that are getting involved, but starting with training videos should help too. So thanks so much for your time and attention, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Hilary. What a wealth of information that is. It's an exciting program, and we'll make sure to include that in our meeting summary materials, the link to that information. So thank you. Okay, now I would like to introduce Christina Trapani, owner of the Ecomaniac Company. So after earning a bachelor's degree in business management and marketing from Western Carolina University, Christina moved to Virginia Beach, where she quickly discovered diverse marine wildlife in Virginia and began volunteering on dolphin and whale watching boats, eventually becoming involved in marine mammal and sea turtle rescue and research with the Virginia Aquarium. In 2008, after years of witnessing the effects of plastic pollution on the animals she worked with and the environment, Christina started Ecomaniac Company, an eco-friendly retail business with a mission to do something about the increasing presence of plastics littering waterways and beaches. As you will see, Ecomaniac Company offers alternatives to single-use plastics and other eco-friendly products. In addition to Ecomaniac Company, Christina is the program director of the Keep It Beachy Clean Litter Prevention Program, field coordinator for a Virginia statewide balloon litter monitoring project, and co-founder and director of the Virginia Plastic Pollution Prevention Network. She also serves on the Virginia Green Travel Alliance Board, the Virginia Marine Debris Reduction Plan Leadership Team, and the Mayor's Commission on Offshore Wind and Clean Energy. And I'll also add that she is a member of our Mid-Atlantic Marine Debris Work Group. So welcome to Christina. Thank you for being here today, and I will hand it over to you.
Thank you so much for having me. Let's see, I'm gonna share my screen. Can you hear me okay? Well, I'm figuring all this out over here.
Yep, you sound good.
Okay. My slideshow. Oh, there you are. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so thanks for the intro and thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk to y'all today with a main focus on my business because as you heard, I am involved in a lot of research projects and litter prevention projects and education, and often my talks are more focused on that aspect of things. But this talk is actually a lot of fun because we're going to talk more about solutions, and my tagline is actually simple solutions to plastic pollution. So I did start Ecomaniac Company back in 2008. It started with, it was inspired by a reusable shopping bag that had a grocery store logo on it. And I thought, well, I wonder if more people would, carry reusable shopping bags if they were fun. So my sister and I got together and we designed 10 different bags and printed them all up on a whim and attended an Earth Day event, and they were pretty well received. And since then, so that's more than 13 years ago, since then, I've grown this business to have more than 200 different products that have a focus on reducing single-use plastic. So it's alternatives to single-use plastics. It's also products that allow people to buy things that you would normally think of that would come in plastic packaging. And these products are often taken different forms so that they can be packaged differently, cardboard boxes versus plastic wrap or something like that. And then I also have some fun fair trade products. I like to source my products from companies that are manufacturing responsibly and with fair trade. They're actually products that are often made in developing countries, and there's always an environmental component to that. There's also community components to that where money goes back into the community, and then the artisan or the maker or the farmer is being paid fairly for their work. So that is Ecomaniac Company in a nutshell. So one of the things that I have learned over the years being involved in this issue of marine debris is that we get a lot of facts and figures and news that is often overwhelming and depressing. So when I am talking to my customers, I like to kind of bring them back down again and remind them that it is really important to understand that as individuals, they can make a difference. So I think the saying goes something like, we don't need a few people doing everything. We need everybody doing a few things. And another tool that I use when I do talk to my customers and also when I'm picking out products is the wonderful top 10 list from the International Coastal Cleanup. I like to point out that most of the items on this top 10 list are food based. So they're coming from the things that we eat and drink. And also these are things that people often use in their everyday lives. So we can go back and evaluate this list and come up with the alternatives, turn off that faucet. Like I say to them, if you're not using it, it can't end up as litter. That makes sense. Okay, so we have the usual reusable alternatives. These are items that most likely if you're on, at this conference, if you're watching all these talks, you're probably already doing these kind of things: reusable shopping bags, reusable straws, and reusable bottles. So, and unfortunately, in many cases, we are kind of preaching to the choir. We want to make sure we bring in other people from the community, and we try to reach out to people that are on that kind of either don't care list or I care, but I don't know what to do list. So for those of you that are already kind of doing these things or are considering doing these things, I have a few tips for you, because one of the most common things I hear about reusable shopping bags, for example, is, oh, I have a ton of reusable shopping bags. they're in my car and I always forget them. So my tip to you, if you're one of those people, is next time you forget your reusable shopping bag, you put all of your groceries back in the cart without any kind of bag. Forget the paper bag even. Just put it all back in the cart all by itself, no bags, and then take it back to your car and then bag it with those bags that have been stuck in your trunk that you forget to take out. Because if you do that once in 95-degree weather or even 30-degree weather, I guarantee the next time you go to the grocery store, you are going to remember to bring your reusable shopping bags. The tricky part about reusable straws is when you're going out to eat is to make sure you don't get the plastic straw. So again, when you sit down, it just has to become a habit that when you sit down and you order your drink, no straw, please. And hopefully, I'd say 75% of the time that's going to work. We are in the process, I think, of shifting the paradigm where a lot of restaurants are going to start to only serve straws on request. A lot of restaurants are already doing that. It depends on where you are. But as consumers, we have to kind of push that switch by asking for no straw. And then, of course, the reusable water bottle. Something I like to tell my customers, or when I'm giving talks about reusable water bottles, is that when you purchase bottled water, it costs you more per gallon for bottled water than it does for gasoline. And gas is really expensive right now. So you see that light bulb go off like, oh yeah, because pretty much water out of your tap is free. So use that bottle. I got my bottle right here. Anyway. And then there's other alternatives that you may or may not know about. One of the biggest comments I get about plastic wrap is that stuff is so annoying. Okay, so stop using it. How about that? There are many alternatives out there to single-use plastic wrap. The bees wrap or beeswax wrap is very popular. It is cotton, it's beeswax, it's all natural. It just molds with the heat of your hands. You can use it to cover a bowl, wrap a sandwich, wrap half a cantaloupe, anything like that. And it's washable and it's reusable, and then it's compostable at the end of its life. So that's really a great alternative. There's lots of silicone can covers and bowl covers, and you can see down on the bottom left you can cover your fruits and vegetables directly. And then there's other items out there on the right. That's a bowl cover. It's just a drawstring cotton item that you can just cover your bowl, skip the plastic wrap, throw it in the refrigerator. So these are great alternatives to that plastic wrap. I know here in Virginia, I'm not sure if you know this or not, and I'm not sure what other states do this, but your plastic bag recycling takes all film. So it's not just the plastic bag, but you can also, if you have clean plastic wrap that you don't want to throw away, you can take that back to the grocery store for recycling. In Virginia, it goes to Trex, who's making composite decking with our leftover plastic wrap. Okay, what do I have next? Oh, the produce bags. So I love these. Pre-pandemic, a lot of people were loving these, and I was selling them like crazy. It slowed right down during the pandemic. People, I guess they just weren't using reusable bags in many cases, understandable. So it's starting to pick up just a little bit, but grabbing a few of these reusable produce bags. So if you go in with your reusable shopping bag and then you start pulling off those plastic bags in the produce section, you're kind of defeating your purpose. So if I forget my produce bags, most of the time I'll just throw everything in the cart without a bag at all, because mostly I'm either going to wash it or peel off that outer layer. So I find that pretty safe. Like I said before, we do make our decisions with our dollars, our spending dollars. Try to avoid those fruits and vegetables that are wrapped in plastic. It drives me absolutely crazy to see one single organic potato that's shrink wrapped in plastic. It makes no sense. So supporting your local farmers and your farmers markets is a great solution to just avoiding plastic altogether when you're shopping for produce, because most of them don't use plastic wrap on their fresh produce. Waste-free lunch options. So this is fun also. There's a ton of options out there. You probably have something in your cupboard. I try to remind my customers that they don't have to buy things right then and there. They have things that are already useful for all of these applications. You can make a reusable shopping bag or reusable produce bag out of an old t-shirt. You can just grab an old Tupperware container to put your sandwich in. It's just skipping that single-use zipper bag or the single-use plastic bags or containers for your lunches. So you can bring your own utensils. I love the to-go-ware bamboo utensil sets. I think they're so much fun and they're handy. I keep one in my car. I've got some in my purse. But the reality is you can just grab something out of your kitchen and take it with you. You know, have a little go kit in your car. You never know when you're going to run into a food truck and everything looks delicious and you have to have something. That is a vegan Coney Island hot dog, by the way. It was really good. Sandwich bags, little stainless steel containers, reusable sandwich bags, reusable sandwich wraps. The wraps are wonderful because you open them up and your sandwich is already on a placemat. Nice clean surface no matter where you go. The single-use to-go boxes. So Matt earlier was talking about the restaurants and, you know, the styrofoam containers and trying to cut down on all these single-use cups and containers. We're getting somewhat back to normal. So, you know, you can, if you go into a restaurant and they're using plastic cups, you can try to use your own cup. I always at least ask. Some places will do it, some places will not. But there should be no reason why you can't bring in your own container for your leftovers. So whether it's a collapsible container, one of these stainless steel layered lunch boxes, I keep an emergency lunch box in my car for leftovers, or just grab whatever you have in your cabinet and throw something in your car, have it there for whatever stopovers, restaurant visits you might have. That way you don't feel obligated to take the single-use plastic box or the foam box. And the other part of that equation is that as restaurants are starting to switch over to the more sustainable to-go boxes, they do cost money. They cost a lot more money than foam and plastic, especially if they're using the compostable, like the paper products. So supporting your small local restaurants, one way you can do that is to bring your own box and save them that money that they're spending on those containers. So it's good for the environment and it's good for your local business. Let's see. And then there's the plastic-free alternatives. So these are items, like I mentioned before, that you would normally think of when you go into a regular grocery store and you're looking at shampoo. There are almost no shampoos that don't come in a plastic bottle. I don't think I've ever seen a shampoo that wasn't in a plastic bottle in a grocery store. Same with conditioner. Deodorant is always in a plastic container. So there are alternatives out there. There are solid forms of deodorant, shampoo, lotion, conditioner. There are different packaging options, like using cardboard for a chapstick or lotion or deodorant. Again, a lot of these are done on a more local level. So you're supporting your local businesses and you're also buying things that are plastic free. So they're out there. You might have to look a little bit for them. Go to your local farmers markets, your craft markets, you know, talk to your favorite soap company. If they are wrapping their soaps in plastics, ask them if they have another idea for how they can package their soaps, like using the cardboard strip or no packaging at all. You know, they might be willing to listen to you and consider that, especially if it's a less expensive option and an easier one to use. Home care products. I love the dish block, the dish soap. It looks just like a bar of soap. It just sits on your sink and you use that instead of the squishy plastic bottle for your detergent. So that's a really good option. We've got a local company that's making toilet fresheners and sink fresheners out of very basic ingredients, and people can just grab whatever they want and either put it in their own container or have some paper bags for that. The laundry strips, love them. They're great space savers and they come in a cardboard box. It's very recyclable. Wool dryer balls instead of the dryer sheets. The dryer sheets, I'm pretty sure contain plastic and whatever chemicals they use to make them smell the way they smell. And then of course, plant-based sponges, you know, anything that comes without plastic. These products are becoming more and more available as time goes on because the awareness plastics is growing. I've seen that in my business, and manufacturers and very innovative entrepreneurs are coming up with lots of alternatives. So it's really exciting to see what's coming out these days in as far as plastic-free alternatives. Another thing that I'm seeing more and more of is refill. So there's lots and lots of refill shops opening up around Virginia, especially. I don't know about other states, but I'm pretty sure it's a trend. So it's probably happening. And a lot of our regular grocery stores are starting to carry refill options, bulk coffee, bulk granola, bulk candy, things like that. So you just have to remember to bring your own container, put the weight of the container somewhere handy so you can make sure that you take that weight off when you go to the cash register to measure it out or to weigh it out, because you don't want to have to pay for a container when you're paying for really expensive whatever coffee, or not expensive. Either way, you just don't want to have to pay that extra money for your container. I have a wonderful pet store right down the street from me. They have bulk dog treats. So I just go in there with my little cotton bag and fill it up, and I have a happy dog with all his treats. And there's pet shampoo that comes in solid form too. Let's see. So it was funny, on Tuesday, someone mentioned, I think it was Dr. Leonard, that they were doing a campaign with reusable straws and reusable utensils, but all of that came wrapped individually in plastic. So if you're a business or an organization, or you're looking for gifts for a wedding or anything like that, whether you order this stuff from me or from anyone else, make sure that you remind the person that you're ordering it from that you don't want plastic packaging. Sometimes you might get some. I just did an order. It was 1,000 items. They wanted to wrap them 10 items per poly bag, and I requested that they not use plastic at all. They were worried about scratching, so we compromised at one big bag instead of 100 individual poly bags. I think that's a good compromise. I would have preferred no plastic at all, but anyway, so there's lots of ways to make sure that your bulk items or your swag items are environmentally friendly, lot less plastic, and then make sure the item itself is something that's going to be used and reused. Some of the single-use things that are being given out at different events or whatever, they're useless, and people just grab them because they're free. So if they're going to grab something that's free, why not make it something that they're actually going to use? Okay, that's my quick rundown, down and dirty, of some of the ways you can skip single-use plastics. Those are my customer favorites here. There's so many more things that you can have. So yesterday was the debut of the mobile eco truck. I am now going to be able to bring all of my eco-friendly products to you if you're local. That thing's fun to drive, but not too far. So it's got all the eco-friendly products. It's going to be running the store on solar power pretty soon. Home parties for the planet. I love this idea. I love that I can now take a whole business and travel with it and take it to someone's home and talk to small groups of people. They might be really into it, but they've invited their friends and their family, and get them all excited about it, and find things that they can deal with using, or they can get excited about using, however you want to look at that. That's it. We mentioned earlier that if you were in this session, you were going to get a secret coupon code. So I have entered a 10% off code for conference attendees. You just use the MAMDS, which is the Mid-Atlantic Marine Debris Summit 2021, in the code on my website, ecomaniaccompany.com. Get 10% off. Take that next step towards a less plastic living. How's that? All right, thanks. And I will be happy to take your questions later.
Thank you so much, Christina. Just so many options. And I know in our household, we've been moving away from plastics, and I can't believe the number of plastic alternatives. And it's great to see that your business is a local business that we could support. And thank you for so generously providing a code for our attendees today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, looking forward to the Q&A. All right, so for a final speaker of today and of the summit. So last but certainly not least, I'd like to welcome Steve Raabe of Opinion Works. Steve is the president of Opinion Works, an independent research firm based in Annapolis, Maryland. He founded Opinion Works in 2001 to apply market research best practices to bring about positive behavior change and engagement in public health, environmental stewardship, higher education, and charitable giving. His firm measures public attitudes and the need for services for state and local agencies from Oregon to Delaware. He has designed studies and polls for state and local agencies, national foundations, and for the Baltimore Sun newspaper. Throughout the Mid-Atlantic region, he actively supports Chesapeake Bay restoration and efforts to combat marine debris, studying the key drivers of behavior change under the community-based social marketing model. He has measured constituent engagement for nonprofit groups, colleges, and universities from coast to coast. He has also worked extensively with many of the partners of this summit, including our Marine Debris Working Group. He is an absolutely invaluable contributor to our balloon release reduction campaign. Previously, Steve served on Capitol Hill in Washington as public policy director, and he graduated cum laude from American University in Washington. So welcome, Steve. Really, really looking forward to your presentation today, and I will go ahead and hand it over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Avalon. And as I get my presentation going, I just want to say how inspired I am by Christina Trapani. I mean, it is so good, isn't it, to hear about solutions and to hear about all those things that we can do. And so I'm absolutely excited about what Christina is doing and grateful to be part of this panel today. So we're going to talk for a few minutes about impacting marine debris through good listening. So here we are, millions of individual decision makers. I mean, this is the basis of all the work that I do, is thinking about individuals who are impacting problems like marine debris and how we can get through to them and make a difference. And, you know, individual decisions add up, they make a big impact. So social science tells us, and intuition about our friends and neighbors and ourselves tells us that all of these things that you see on the screen are driving people's decision-making, their perceptions, their biases, hopes, distractions, etc., driving all of their decisions and actions. And so for us to be successful in getting people to behave differently, we need to take into account those things. We have decision makers like this guy, you know, so who knows what he was doing on his lawnmower, but, you know, we need to think about everybody out there and how we're going to impact their behavior. So today, in this presentation, I am going to tell you a little bit about community-based social marketing. Not long. I think other people have touched on this prior to me, but I want to relate it to how it's potentially impacting or affecting marine debris-related behavior. I mentioned good listening. How does listening relate to this? So I'll talk about that. And then we're going to look at a case in point. And that's what Avalon was referring to. I'm working with the Marine Debris Working Group. And so I'm going to talk just briefly about the work that's going on there, because it'll give you a good case example. And oh, by the way, can we convince Florida man? So let's start with poll question number 5. If my friends at Longwood could put that up on the screen for everybody. I want to start there. Just get a sense from you. Have you been involved with an outreach, engagement, communications, or behavior change campaign related to marine debris, or frankly, any other environmental issue in your work? And I'm only doing that. We'll see how that poll comes out. I'm only doing that so that we can all have a sense of who we have here, you know, and that will help me a little bit scale my presentation, but I think it might be interesting for us to see who we have. So when we're ready, we will have Longwood share results. So of us who are here today, almost 2/3 are currently involved in an outreach campaign. That's great, you know, and then another 1/3 in the past. So most of you are currently involved, and a lot of the things that I will say may be no news to you, but I'm hoping to give you a couple new things to think about. So first of all, credentialing my own firm, I just want to briefly say, we're a market research firm at our base. And so in the 90s, I was working for a commercial market research firm and learning all of the tools, all of the best practices that corporate America uses to sell us Nikes. And it occurred to me that I really wanted to kind of line up my volunteer life and my work life much better. Why do you, go to work and spend your good hours doing one thing and then you're spending all your volunteer hours doing something else? I think all of you have in one way or another made the same decision in your life and career. And so it feels good, doesn't it? I mean, to be able to line that up. So these are some of the organizations we're working for. The Baltimore Sun, that's kind of a hangover from my past life as a political polling guy. But, since 2007, we've been their public opinion polling organization. But most of our work is for environmental organizations or health-related foundations or public health departments, always looking at the questions of behavior and engagement of audiences so that we can reach people and move them. So I want to talk with you about this horrible practice of balloon releases, and we all know the impact of all these happy people or all these solemn people reverentially sending balloons up to heaven to their loved one. So this is a deep, almost intractable problem. I want to tell you the two basic tools that we use in our work to help all of you figure out how to change behavior. So tool number one is quantitative, and we all know what that is. It's a survey or it's a measurement that you can count. So what are people doing? What do they perceive? What do they believe? What media channels do they pay attention to? And within the general public, who can we move? Who is movable or persuadable or willing to be engaged, and what are they willing to do? These are all quantitative questions. And so this is reflected in survey type work. This is a survey we've put together for the Chesapeake Bay program to measure behaviors across the Chesapeake Bay region that produce cleaner water. The output is here, it's quantitative. So we're counting things and we're able to determine what percentage of the public, in this case, may have redirected a downspout towards a planted area rather than an impervious surface. So let's look at balloon release behavior specifically, the quantitative measurement of it. And by the way, in the 5 states that are represented here in the Mid-Atlantic region, I am not trying to single anybody out. In fact, my own state of Maryland looks worst, in this analysis, but that's not the point. The point is that when you ask people if they've been part of a balloon release event, half or more of the public says yes. It's a phenomenally widespread issue. And we go on in this survey to ask people how frequently, how recently, and there are some people that are very actively engaging in balloon releases. And then there's this quantitative measure. If you're invited to take part in a balloon release in the future, or if you attend an event where one occurs, how likely are you to take part? And across all of our states in the region, you can see what you've got. Around half or a little more than half are like, yeah, I'm likely to do that. And then you've got this might or might not group. So let's start here. It's a big issue. It's a big problem. There's a lot of people doing it. And oh, by the way, when we ask them, people don't necessarily think there's anything wrong about it. So there's a lot of blissful unawareness. Okay, let me go to tool number 2, qualitative. This is the other tool that we have as a broad category. And this is where you're interviewing people in depth. So what are the barriers to them taking action? What are the motivations that will get them to act? What are they hoping for? What do they see as they look out into the future? And how do we engage people? So this qualitative piece is really important to understanding what people are thinking. So you all know, the most common form of this is called a focus group, and everybody's familiar with that methodology. So I just want to emphasize a point about focus groups and how they work. We're listening not for the division as we do in quantitative surveys, but we're listening for consensus. We're listening for the ideas that animate the most people in the group, that make them most moved and excited or sad or whatever that's motivating. To create that atmosphere where people are willing to talk to us in that way, we have to build trust and affirm everybody. So it's not a time for advocacy or judgment. It's a time for listening and affirmation. And that's what we're trying to do. Kathy, a longtime wonderful colleague of mine, is one of my wonderful, affirming, trusting moderators. And so, you know, you encourage people to tell their story, as Curtis was saying before. I mean, I think that that's what we're going for here. We want to probe people's feelings. And so these are done in settings like this. This is the pre-pandemic way, and maybe the post-pandemic way, we'll see. But we're also doing them in settings like this. And this happens to be a one-on-one interview where we get somebody on Zoom, and this person, Liliana, she is evaluating info cards that would encourage proper recycling behavior. And so in all sorts of ways, you know, whether Zoom or whether in person, whether in groups or whether one-on-one, we want to really deeply understand what people are thinking and feeling. So, okay, so let me move to community-based social marketing briefly. I just want to give you a little primer from my point of view about how this works without getting deeply into the social science. I think it's very, very intuitive. For those of you, many of you have worked with this method called CBSM. Some of you have not, but here's how it works. This curve, we're all familiar with it. With regard to behavior adoption, the original author of this curve is Everett Rogers, who some of you know, a famous social scientist from the, let's say, mid-20th century. And he's the one who developed this model that we're looking at: innovators, early adopters, et cetera, across the curve to the right, all the way over to what he called laggards. Now, this has been adapted by other people. Many people have adopted, adapted, and updated this over the years since. And I want to give credit to Nancy Lee, who's a social scientist out in the Puget Sound area. And she has created this kind of three-part paradigm where she basically calls these people on the left side of the curve the show me people. The point is, show me what to do and I'll do it. These people are like, you're going to have to make me, right? Club me or I won't do it. And so they're the make me's. And the big bulge in the middle are the help me's. Those are people that are not going to do it if we just whisper something to them. Don't have to club them over the head, but they need a little help. And that's the whole theory of community-based social marketing, that concept of give me a little help. And so we'll talk about what that is. But this blue curve that overlays the yellow describes what has been our traditional approach to the behavior adoption curve. So on the left, you know, the bulge is, hey, we do a lot of communicating. You know, we've got brochures, websites, we speak to community groups, we do lots of awareness raising events and stuff like that. And on the right, we do a lot, we expend a lot of societal resources to do things like you see on the screen: regulate, sue, fine, pass laws, all of that stuff to make sure that those laggards get handled. And who does that leave out? This great big bulge in the middle, which I would describe these help me people as well-intentioned, but just not motivated enough. And there is a need to give them that little nudge. You've heard about nudge theory. I mean, that's what this is. You know, we're trying to give people a little push or a little nudge. So let's go to poll question number 6 and put that up on the screen, which will, I'm just curious about another, before I go into the final little bit of this. Does your organization have the expertise you need to effectively plan and run an outreach campaigns? So submit your response. We will see what comes up. I just want to see how confident you feel. Do you feel like you have access to what you need? Do you have the expertise you need, whether in-house or in reach? How are you feeling about that? So let's see what pops up. Okay, so 14% of us feel that we have strong expertise in this area, and most feel that we have moderate. And then there's a fifth of us or a fourth of us who admit, no shame in this, we have little or no capability. So one thing I want to kind of help everybody with is, where can I go find that kind of help that I might need? And even if you feel that you've got a lot of expertise, or if you have a moderate amount, how can I get the help that I need? So this guy, Doug Mackenzie Moore, I know that Cindy referred to him earlier in her presentation, probably others have. He's a leading thinker and motivator and trainer on the concept of community-based social marketing. And many of you are familiar with him and with his books, have probably been to his trainings. And so obviously Doug is available, and he has been an advisor to the balloon release effort that we're involved with. This graphic is out of that book that I just had on the screen, his book. And the important point that he makes here is that the tools that we choose to move that help me group need to tie back to the barrier that you're detecting. And I'm going to get to the barrier in just a second. How do we figure out what the barrier is? But if the barrier is lack of motivation, then we want to use these types of tools. Christina talked about leaving your reusable bags in the car, which we all do sometimes, and so what you need there is a prompt, which is a reminder. And so that's the kind of thing we're talking about. Lack of social pressure. So we need to change the norm. We need to get people to start to figure out that they need to use reusable straws or whatever it may be. So the norm needs to change, and so on down the list. You can see that if there's a tool or a category of tools related directly to the behavior, to the barrier that you identify. So I want to give you one of my very favorite examples of a really effective use of this sort of tool. So a friend of mine who was working at Clean Water Action in suburban DC on the Maryland side, in Prince George's County, we had just conducted some focus group work around downspout redirects. And he was really curious about our work. And we had actually done it in this area of Prince George's County that was right up against the DC line. And what he decided to do was to sort of test our work and roll it out and see how it would go if it was actually out there in the field. So they took their canvassing operation, which normally is knocking on doors and asking for signatures and money for important things. Instead, for 2 canvassing days, we retrained his canvassers and had them knock and offer downspout redirects to people. And this neighborhood is very hilly and there's a lot of green space, but a lot of asphalt and concrete and water running down street gutters and things like that. And the tool that we used was this pledge, this commitment form. And, as you know, social science research says if somebody signs on the dotted line, they are much more likely to take the action. So we implemented that tool. Our canvassers went to the door and offered up this pledge after they gave a little pitch, which was either A, around flooding in their yard and into their basement, or B, the water quality of the Anacostia River, which was nearby. And guess what message was much more impactful? It was the basement flooding message. But anyway, half of the homes that were visited by the canvassers signed the pledge. And when they went back with the extenders provided by the county's stormwater program, half of them ended up following through. So in other words, in 2 days of canvassing plus a revisit, we got a 24% uptake. And can you imagine getting that kind of a result from any sort of a communications effort that you might try, any kind of a website or a public speaking type campaign? You wouldn't. Here's another quickie, and this is something we did for National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and some other partners. And the issue was wetlands on agricultural lands and the fact that a lot of ag landowners are not restoring wetlands to the extent that we all hope they will to improve water quality in the Chesapeake Bay. And we did focus groups, heard a long list of barriers, but ended up with the understanding from them that the person they trusted, the entity they trusted, was the county ag office, because those folks are on their side. They're on my side. They're not trying to make me do things I don't want to do. But those county ag agents had no idea how to talk about wetlands. And it's a very complicated thing because there's many programs and lots of nuances to those programs. So we had to develop a website and equip those folks in the county offices to have these conversations. And it's now live. It's called Wetlands Work, and it's very successful in terms of engendering those conversations that result in landowners deciding this is something that they could do that makes sense for them. So let's go to balloon releases. I want to tell you about our process really quickly. We did a series of research. It was an iterative process over several years, little bits of research that we learned from and then piloted and learned again. And last fall, we took that region-wide survey that I showed you earlier, but then followed that up with 20 Zoom interviews with individuals. And these people were recruited because they were all active, what I would call chronic balloon releasers. And so these are people who are getting their family members together every year on Father's Day and releasing balloons in the cemetery in memory of Dad and that sort of stuff. We had one woman who released balloons 3 times a year on 3 different anniversaries and got her whole family, her extended family involved in that. So that's who they were. We showed them images that had emerged from prior work, the impact on wildlife, both aquatic and terrestrial wildlife. And I just want you to know that the reaction from people when just shown these sorts of images was overwhelming. I mean, they were saddened and surprised and devastated that these sorts of things occur when their balloons come back down. So people were like, whoa, I had no idea. And the word that kept being used was innocent. You know, the animals, those animals are innocent. I didn't mean to do that to them. So then there was a pivot. There was a second messaging track. And we wanted them to, of course, understand what they could do instead. And there were a series of images and ideas that they were shown around, let's say, planting something, planting a beautiful garden, releasing or blowing balloons, you know, that kind of stuff, all of which were exciting and interesting. And so we ended up with this idea that the 2 messaging tracks worked, but you had to allow people a little bit of time to absorb track 1, that animal impact track, to recoil from it. You know, there's an emotional response to that. And so we need to understand how people react and to give them that moment of breath, to take that in, to sort of deal with the feelings they are feeling, whether those are just grief or guilt or whatever strong emotions are occurring, before they're ready to get operational and talk about those alternatives. And so we had to sort of stage the messaging and the outreach so that people could have that moment to recoil, think, and then get ready to go ahead and act. And then there were some other things that resonated. You know, the sense that balloons go up and they're gone, but you can make a long-lasting tribute, like a tree or a beautiful garden or a bench, you know, and so people love that idea. We also learned that the ceremonial impact of getting together with loved ones and releasing the balloons, it was part spectacle, it was part visual, but it was very much that ceremonial bit of saying some words, saying a prayer, or whatever they were doing, and then letting the balloons go together. And so that ceremonial aspect can be recreated, because that's really at the root what was most important about balloon releases for the people that were doing it. And the thought of growth and new life with whatever I do instead was really appealing for people, especially if it was in memory of a lost loved one. And then colorful things, you know, a great, beautiful, colorful garden or something like that is often the thing, or a really happy, large bubbles or whatever, you know. So those takeaways led us, and, you know, we are now at the point where materials are, with many thanks to Virginia Whitmer and others who have worked really hard, especially Virginia, you know, on these materials and things that are ready to move forward. Through the working group in Marco, we are partnering with aquariums in all of the states, and we'll be implementing this campaign in their setting with their visitors. The idea being that we're working towards what Doug Mackenzie Moore would suggest is important. In fact, he's told us in our coaching calls, he wants to see us extract or secure a commitment, a public commitment from people to not release balloons. And so that's the strategy. And so that public commitment will occur in different ways. It may be a selfie station that people post on their social media. It may be a display inside the aquarium. There may be other ways it manifests itself. It may be an online board where people can go and post images of themselves doing the alternatives instead. And so, and this, which my final slide is the decal that people can get to display wherever they'd like to indicate that they've made the decision. So this campaign is about to uncork, and we can't wait to see how it goes. Finally, I just want to say this. So today, my wife, not knowing that I was going to talk with all of you today, I hadn't told her what I was doing this afternoon, and she sent me this post from a coworker that she received today. And my wife put this up on Facebook, but this is hilarious. You know, here is the released a balloon with this wonderful message of love that's printed on it, which came down in this person's pasture. And they have many animals, as you can see. And the person, basically, this person is on message in terms of what we hope that they will say, except that I just want to note, maybe the multiple exclamation marks and the mean faces and stuff are not going to win over people. I think we need to be a little more affirmative and understanding in the way we express ourselves, but the anger is understandable, isn't it? So onward, we will conquer this, as with many other things. So with that, I say thank you, and I look forward to whatever comes next in our panel discussion.
Wonderful. Oh, thank you so much, Steve, for that great overview of CBSM and of the balloon reduction project. This is great. So we are going to now ask, so Steve, go ahead, leave your camera on. And I'd also would like to invite Curtis, Hilary, and Christina to turn your cameras back on, if you don't mind. So we will kind of do this final Q&A panel discussion. If you haven't already, attendees, I certainly welcome you to add your questions into the question and answer box, so we can relay some of those questions to our speakers today. If you do have a question that's specific to a speaker, please do indicate that in how you write your question. I also would like to invite Laura McKay, manager of the Virginia Coastal Zone Management Program, to join me in helping moderate this Q&A session. She's a wealth of knowledge about marine debris solutions. She's been working for so many years in this space and really leads our regional effort on marine debris prevention and reduction. So thanks so much, Laura. So I'll go ahead, and we do have some questions that we received from folks as they registered for the event. And I'll go ahead and kind of start with one of those questions, and then I'll navigate back over to our Q&A box just to give folks some time to put in their thoughts there. So as we've talked about in various points during this summit, we have audience members from all over the world joining us today. So I'm just curious, from any of you, do you see that there are elements of your work that could be applied in other regions or countries seeking to reduce or prevent debris? Who's brave enough to go first? Hi, Christina.
I can say that the business that I have is unique in my area. Obviously, I can't speak for the rest of the world, but I think there are probably some environmentally passionate people out there who could put a business like this together. It's retail. It's retail. Just leave it at that. So you also have to be aware that it's not just puppy dogs and sunshine. It's accounting and inventory management. But my degree was in business management, and then I got involved in marine animal rescue, and it all came together and became this business. So I think anywhere in this world, especially right now, as the awareness grows, this can be a successful business.
I'd like to jump in and offer a comment, which is, I listen professionally and have a team of people who do that, who are good interviewers, and we listen, but all of us can do that. I mean, I think that what the world needs right now, what does the world need right now in these crazy times that we're living through? We need more affirmation of each other. We need more trust. People are not even able to make a public policy decision in Washington because they're too busy impugning each other's character. And so really, if we'd all just pause and take a breath for a moment and stop trying to convince each other and instead listen a little. And so I suggest that that's a universal truth, and that all of us, wherever you may be located, all of us can bring this to our work. Bring your own personal sense of listening first and advocating second. I think that if you're going to be a successful advocate, the very first thing to know is what's on the other person's mind and to understand their point of view. And if you can try to do that, I do believe that your efforts will go quite a bit further.
Yes. Oh, go ahead, Curtis.
Just to add to that, I think, what's been really successful for us is really about the process of engagement. And it's to Steve's point, it really does start with the listening. And that's intentional listening. So listening to understand, not listening to respond. One of the things, one of a really great mentor, Mamie Parker, in so many of her talks always shares that, in order to listen, one has to be silent. And listen and silent both have the exact same letters in them. And so it's so important to really, take that moment to absorb that information coming in. And then really that co-creation and co-design, things like moving at the speed of trust, building the transformational relationships, expressing that commitment from a sustainable and longevity perspective. When we build those types of foundations, the work happens in a sustainable way, which I think is very critical, because we don't want to just want to make things happen, right? We want to sustain it for a long period of time.
I'll just add on a really practical note too, that anybody can get started in taking this kind of approach with community-based social marketing by going to the website. Doug Mackenzie Moore makes his materials really available and accessible. And I think, we just learned so much. It was all new to me, being trained more in government and biology, to understand the psychology of behavior change was really important. And so helpful just reading his book. I think any of us can do that anywhere in the world. I should say, I'm not sure if it's available in all languages across the world, but it may be. So I would just offer that just doing that kind of research on the web can be a huge benefit.
Yeah, and go ahead, Hilary.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to add for something like data collection, there's an interesting challenge in, wanting to have community-based initiatives and solutions and approaches to this work, while also creating uniform data set that's interoperable and can be used to make comparisons at larger scales, like globally or state to state. And so there's a sort of an interesting tension there of top down versus bottom up, and then what's the role of an agency like NOAA in supporting those efforts. So we're kind of moving in the direction of trying to provide resources to help others develop their own solutions that are adaptable, but have this like common framework of data collection that allows apples to apples wherever it's conducted.
Thank you for those responses. And I wanted to just build off of what Steve and Curtis had mentioned. And it kind of strikes me that there's sort of a common theme, at least between the two of your presentations, but certainly this might apply to Christina and Hilary as well, but is this need to listen and understand, and the fact that those building that foundation of trust takes time. And I just would be curious to hear from you, maybe Curtis, and then also Steve, at least, how do you structure your projects and programs given sort of limited resources or maybe limited time from a funding perspective? How do you sort of build those programs so that you can make that strong foundation and communicate that you're understanding the community in which you're working?
Yeah, I'm happy to start, and just, I think for us, it started off with the buy-in, just to know that to really, with our organizational leadership, to really walk through this process with them as well, to make sure that there was this understanding. And I know a really good example of this actually happened a couple years ago, because the Aquarium's community engagement team, as well as many other teams, are now also engaged in a community in South Baltimore and the Jonestown community, which is the location of our new Animal Care and Rescue Center as of 2018. And one of the first conversations that we had as an organization was really thinking about, people had seen these efforts in Masonville, Cove, and South Baltimore that were 10 years plus in the making. So there can be this mindset around, well, it's like, oh, well, the same type of things can happen in East Baltimore. And one of the first things we were saying is like, no. This is something that's going to take time. It's going to the same type of process to build the rapport, to build the connection. It's going to take that investment of a commitment of time. And so I think that constant reminder has been really helpful, just to, and also the results of that, especially around the co-creation space and the ownership of efforts. And again, that sustained ownership of partners of those efforts, and constantly showcasing that and illustrating that has been very beneficial for us, especially for our organization, to maintain that level of time commitment to build the relationships.
I think we do have a question in the Q&A box there. Kelly Moore has asked, in regard to balloon releases, are the paper lanterns that I've seen becoming popular an improvement over those, and or good replacement? Christina's shaking her head no. So go ahead, Christina.
So they're actually illegal in 29 states, as far as I know. And most of those laws are based on the fire hazard, fire code, because they are on fire and wind can switch direction at any time. There's been several incidences of those things landing in places they shouldn't and causing big problems. We've also, on one of our balloon surveys, we found a half of a burnt paper lantern in a dune. So they don't always just go away. Some of them have metal frames, which can entangle animals as well. So no, sorry. They're pretty, but no.
I think we have another question in the chat too. As someone who lives in a very rural area with no bulk buying options and fewer social services and social gathering options, she wonders how the work you do could be adapted to be available for rural residents. I think that was for you, Christina, and Curtis.
I mean, as far as the bulk buying options, yeah, that's a tricky one. If you've only got like the one mom and pop grocery store in town, that's your only choice. You can start requesting bulk options from your grocery store. If it's just you might have a problem. But if there's other people that are interested, encourage them to also talk to the grocery store owners and managers to bring those options. And even some of the reusable alternatives that can be used around the house, especially in the kitchen, like the reusable food wrap and dish soap and things like that. It's making consumer choices with your dollars that speak to these managers and owners, let them know what the customer wants in that area.
Yeah, and from my perspective too, it really does go back to that process. So it's why, when working with partner organizations, it really does start with that process, because the process of engagement is very transferable. It might manifest itself in different ways based on, the various aspects and dimensions of community. But following that type of a process, and it's a non-linear process as well. So you can be in various stages of this process all at the same time when we're engaging community. But You know, we've been able to work with partners in various diverse landscapes to really, and even students too. You know, in 2019 gave a talk to a group of high school students, and we were talking about how we might apply these processes in different types of communities and what that may look like. And so, yeah, I think when we center this type of a process and the way in which we do things, it becomes a lot easier to, you know, really deploy that in so many various situations.
Can I add a thought? It's important for us to be humble, you know, when we go into a new area. So rural, you know, is one variation, and an urban organization trying to reach out to a rural community. Or you could imagine many other variations where you're going into a community that's not a natural fit or is something you don't understand. And so all of our organizations, our agencies, or ourselves as individuals need to have that humility to understand. I think, Curtis, you know, this is maybe part of what you were just saying in a way, but, you know, there is a sense of partnership and maybe being willing to move into second position and understand that the local ally is probably who you need to lean on and let them sort of drive the bus a little bit. And you know, any community you're trying to approach, rural, urban, suburban, whatever it may be, that listening that I'm advocating, you know, will help you understand what the gathering methods are, what the trusted specifiers in that community are. Who do people look to? How do they make their decisions? I mean, all that stuff is not stuff that we know until we ask and listen a little bit, and ask in a way that allow people to answer honestly. So I just reinforce that point about the importance of listening and partnering.
Thanks, everyone. Great responses. And we have another question, and this one's for Hilary. Hilary, you mentioned that monthly monitoring is no longer required when using the MD MAP protocol. Is there a recommended minimum now? For example, do you recommend that surveys be done quarterly? If a group does just one survey, are your new data visualization tools still useful?
Yeah, that's a great question. It really boils down to the goals of whoever is involved in doing the surveys. It all adds up to a collective. So we get the more data, the bigger the picture, the more uses there are for the collective data. A single sort of one-off survey doesn't tell much on its own, but if a lot of those are done over like a short time period over a particular area, or like a blitz of surveys, those can tell us about hotspots and baseline amounts. But to document really trends over time, you have to have some regularity, and quarterly is possible, monthly is even better. So it really depends on the sort of capacity and interest and goals of the group. And then from NOAA's point of view, right, the more the better. From anyone who's using the data, the more the better. But in collective, it all adds up.
Great. Thank you. Thanks. Another sort of in the weeds question, for this one's for Steve. Steve, you mentioned that the social marketing method underlies much of your research into people's behavior, and that leads to understanding of how to effectively influence people's behavior. I will say that I think in my experience with community-based social marketing, and maybe with yours as well, it's often confused because social marketing sounds a lot like social media. Just wondering if you could sort of talk about how those two differ, and how you might communicate what social marketing is, and in the context of a world in which social media is so important.
Well, couldn't we just do away with social media? I mean, I think the world wouldn't it be a better place? I'm kidding, but you know, I would like to say that, of course, that's a common thing that people do, is sort of cross those over because the names are so similar. But you know, I think everybody here hopefully understands the important difference. You know, social media is a communications channel, And so it is a networking tool. It is a way for people to be in touch with each other. I mean, it is both your personal network and then the broader community that you're reaching, so that social media can be a tool in the proverbial toolkit that you might employ in a social marketing strategy. But social marketing is a much broader construct, and it's going back to that sense of help that I talked about earlier. So the types of help that you might provide, a social norming campaign, if that's the type of help that we embark upon, social media could play an important role in that. Or as we're thinking about with the balloon effort, you know, if visible public commitments are part of the effort, then hey, selfies taken in a strategic location with a commitment embedded in it visually and then distributed to people's social media networks, that's a public commitment, and that is a good social marketing strategy. So anyway, I guess you know where I'm coming from, and everybody makes that little mistake about confusing the two, but those are the differences that I see.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that, Steve. This one's a broader question for the group to consider. You each kind of represent different sectors of work within marine debris and litter reduction. So I just would be curious to hear from you all about what's the best way for people to get involved with marine debris prevention and reduction, in your opinions.
I'll start. I don't think there's a best way. I think it's very individual and something that you heard, I think, probably through this whole summit and definitely in this series of talks, is that it's very choose your own adventure. Every individual has something to contribute, but not everything to contribute, right? So figuring out what where your strengths or your areas of passion and influence lie would be where to start. So it's up to you.
I echo that. I think this panel demonstrates that. I mean, each of us has maybe a slightly different orientation and contribution to this issue and problem. And that's a demonstration of the fact that, yeah, as I think Hilary just kind of said, you know, think about your own gifts, think about your propensities. So some of us are natural listeners, some of us are natural advocates, some of us are community builders, some of us are retailing wizards, you know, whatever. Some of us are physical scientists who believe very deeply in the science, you know, and so whatever it is, I think that's, you know, connecting your competency and passion to this problem that requires many different approaches to solve is, I guess, maybe my answer.
Yeah, I think just to build off of that, and this also connects to another question that was in the chat about youth engagement. You know, one of the things that I've noticed, for example, in working with like group projects has been that identifying of people's gifts, strengths, and interests, and using that as those gateways for engagement. So, you know, there's so many ways that people can be involved and engaged, and you know, that idea of relevancy, relatability, meaningfulness, you know, applying one's gifts and strengths and interests, those are very dynamic things to consider. And so really kind of, again, continuing to center those things and dig into those things. And again, that's where co-creation and co-design is so important, because it allows for that. It allows people, as Hilary mentioned, like that choosing your own adventure, choosing your own path in a way that's going to produce that meaningfulness that we know is so important.
I guess my contribution to all of that is to follow your passion. You know, that is the passion is what gets you involved in whatever cause that you're all about. And if it is marine debris, again, and I'm echoing, I think all of you follow your strengths. And whether it's public speaking or retail wizardry. Um, it's yeah, and a lot of it, I love the learn by doing approach with beach cleanups. You know, you go out and you get people that might not normally be interested in the topic, and they get on a beach and they start to see what's going on out there. They get their hands-on experience. And if you can, you know, even if it's a small group of people, you'd be amazed if there's 3 of us out there cleaning the beach, how many people will all of a sudden look around their area and start standing up and picking up the trash and putting it in trash cans nearby, you know, because they're just, you know, you're influencing behavior, I guess, in that way, maybe making them feel a little bit guilty. But yeah, there is no best way. It's how you choose to do it, as long as you're doing something, I think.
Yeah, and so I have two more questions to sort of take us home with the summit here. And so we're building off, Christina, what you were just saying. Several speakers spoke about awareness as a starting point for people. What's the best way to have people take the next step? We have someone in the chat is asking this, you know, being aware doesn't always lead to behavior change. For example, smokers are aware that they should not smoke, but they don't quit. So how do we go from awareness to change?
I mean, well, that's the perfect illustration of community-based social marketing right there, you know. So awareness is the foundation. I mean, you have to build the house on a foundation. There is a need to raise people's awareness to a level so that you can then engage them. So you can't do this without awareness, but awareness alone only gets you that first little 16% or so on the curve. You know, you have to keep moving it over to this, whatever this direction is, right, left, whichever way I'm going. And that is through tools, those community-based social marketing tools. And smoking is a wonderful example. We had next door neighbor, when my wife and I were newly married, we had next door neighbor older couple who were avid smokers. And we would talk to them about it. And they're like, you know, you can ask us all you want, but we're not going to do it till we're ready. And that was an early education for me. And it's so true. And so to get a smoker to quit quickly on cigarette butts, we've done some work on cigarette butt littering. And, you know, you can talk to them about the plastic that's in it, chemicals that's in it. You can talk about the litter or the fact that animals might eat the butt. And you know what the thing was that got all the smokers that we interviewed to wake up was the possibility of starting a fire. And they all had stories about falling asleep in bed and maybe burning through their pajamas or whatever and waking up when they had started their sheets on fire. And so you never know what that answer is, but it's always something that is in addition to raw awareness. They know they shouldn't throw the cigarette butt, many, but do it anyway. And so you have to get past that into something that's truly motivating and then give them that little nudge and push that will get them over the finish
line. When that turtle video came out with the turtle with the straw in its nose, I mean, that was an awareness wake-up call for a lot of people. I had probably for the year after that video came out, I had people constantly asking me if I had seen the video, and then they would immediately buy straws, like reusable straws. I think the year after that video came out, I literally had to dedicate an entire 6-foot table to reusable straws because that video affected so many people on such an emotional level, where they just never, ever even thought that something like that could happen. And really, that was a very rare incident, I believe. But it was still like, oh, this man-made product that I use every day did that, and it was hard to watch, and I don't want to contribute to that. So yeah, that was a great example of just, you know, aren't we fortunate that they found that turtle? Isn't that turtle fortunate? And that she was able to post that video, because I really do believe it changed a lot in marine debris and in awareness on that topic.
Well, I think, shall we wrap things up today? Well, great. Well, I just want to thank you again, Steve and Curtis and Hilary and Christina, for all your wonderful insights and your energy and your dedication that you bring to all of this really important work. We're just so proud of all of you and admire everything that you do. So thanks so much for being with us today. And so at this point, what I'd like to do is ask the members of our planning team to turn on their cameras and share with us a little bit of an aha moment at the end of the summit. So let's see who's coming on here. Oh, and goodbye, Christina's puppy. But I hope Christy Kehoe is coming on, and Judy Tucker, Katie Register, Michaela from Longwood, and who else? Matt Robinson, hopefully, and of course, Avalon. So I'll get us started. You know, it really has been a great week, a little exhausting for everyone, but so wonderful to hear so many good things that are being done. And I especially want to thank NOAA for all your consistent funding support that makes this summit and all the work that we do at Virginia CCM possible. And again, my huge thanks to the summit planning team. You guys have been stellar. But what I found so inspiring and encouraging is that so many organizations and partnerships have sprung up to work on so many facets of marine debris since we at the Virginia CCM program began working on this 10 years ago. I just can't believe the proliferation of organizations and efforts. It's just wonderful. And Curtis, I really also really liked the image you shared with us about creating a constellation, not stars, and making those connections. And then finally, just hearkening back to the quote that we mentioned by Sylvia Earle on day one of the summit. It's so important to remember that each of us alone can and does make a world of difference. But we had 496 people register for this summit, which is definitely a record for us on doing these kinds of summits. So with all of those people joining, I just feel incredibly hopeful that we together will be really an unstoppable force in the years to come, and maybe we will be a brilliant constellation to light the way to the future. So with that, I'm going to ask Christy Kehoe if she wants to share any of her big aha moments from the week.
Thanks, Laura. So over the past 3 days, we heard from so many experts from different fields, from wildlife rescue and rehab, to repurposing recovered fishing gear materials into useful products, to researchers working at all levels to better understand microplastics and microfibers, to groups addressing single-use plastics, and to work being done to engage with diverse communities across the region and even the world. I am truly inspired at how we all came together, regardless of our specific focus, to find solutions to the shared problem. So on behalf of the No Marine Debris program, I just want to thank all of you for the opportunity to participate and learn from this year's summit. Thank you, Laura, and thank you, team.
Thank you, Christy. And next, Katie Register.
Thank you. Well, as you said, it's been so inspirational hearing all these great solutions. I was amazed. I mean, we always know that it has to come through behavior change and new laws, but learned a lot. And I just wanted to share with you my favorite quote from Sylvia Earle. She said, "Only we humans make waste that nature can't digest." And so I'm hopeful that we've all learned a lot about how we can be closer to nature and make our waste more digestible.
Thank you so much, Katie, for all you do. And then Michaela, who is a rising senior at Longwood and has been helping us tremendously for the past few months. What do you think, Michaela?
Well, as a newcomer, I've been learning so much, and I've been having a lot of fun planning this and seeing the presentations. I know I've been telling my boyfriend about all the stuff I've been learning and my family and stuff. So, but yeah, it was just really nice to learn how the practices that I'm doing now, it's helping marine debris, and learning about more ways that I can help marine debris life. So yeah.
Thanks so much, Michaela. It's been great to meet you and work with you. And as a young person, you're our hope moving forward. Maybe someday you'll have Katie Register's job when she retires. All right, and then next, Judy Tucker. Judy is on our Marco staff there. Are you with us, Judy?
Yes,
There she is.
indeed. Thanks, Laura. Last night I had a dinner party with some women I meet with monthly, and I'm going to give them the link to all of these recordings because they were fascinated with all the solutions and the things that they could do. I think for me, thinking organizationally, what was interesting to me was that you and your community can create a closed loop economy. So the example that was given was during yesterday's derelict fishing gear session where Net Your Problem, NET, Net Your Problem, had put together a solution where a community like yours, which might have a derelict fishing gear pollution problem, or you might have fishermen who have old gear they want to dispose of properly, can be matched by Net Your Problem with the manufacturers of that fishing gear or other manufacturers of plastic goods. And those manufacturers get that material for free. They don't have to pay for the raw material except for the cost of shipping. So your community can get rid of the pollution problem and the manufacturers can get this raw material for the cost of shipping. So there are all kinds of partnerships out there and there's lots of hope for all our communities.
Great. Thank you, Judy. And then next, we're going to have Matt Robinson, who's been our resident, keep us laughing, our resident guy. we want to ask him that. Why is this whole issue overrun with women?
It's not important to me, Laura, to be perfectly honest. I just want to say to everyone, I hope I know for a long time we've talking about trash and marine debris is something that affects aesthetics. I think that's how we originally got started with this, what the inspiration was for it. If we think all the way back to the Crying Indian back in the 70s, neat fact that gentleman was actually not a Native American, he was Italian, but it was an effective campaign. And I think the same thing goes here in the Anacostia in DC. You know, I think originally we were worried about seeing trash in our water bodies. And one thing I hope folks take away from the microplastics session is the work that we're now doing here in the Mid-Atlantic through the Chesapeake Bay program and through other partnerships on researching the effects of microplastics on both ecological and human health, looking at how they affect things at the population level, how they affect things at the ecosystem level, looking at things, how they affect each individual, multiple individual species and their physiology. I think there's some real danger there, and it's something we can take a lot more seriously. And specifically human health, the things that Dr. Sam Mason from Penn State was saying about how it affects growth and reproduction in humans, I think is especially disturbing. And I hope we continue to take this seriously and we move forward in a positive direction. It's my hope that as we continue to look at effects on both ecological and human health, that jurisdictions will be inspired to do more, do a lot. I talk a lot about what DC has done, you know, kind of us, you know, self-lauding what we've done as a model, but we have taken some really progressive steps. But we're only 0.1% of the entire Potomac watershed, and we're 0.4% of the entire Chesapeake Bay watershed. There's very, very little that we can do. So we need other jurisdictions to follow suit if possible. And with that, I'll leave you with a quote from Winston Churchill: "You can always count on the Americans to do the right thing after they have tried everything else."
Yes, I have heard that one. Well, thanks so much, Matt. And we owe you a debt of gratitude for all your dedication to the microplastics issue. You've been a real leader in the Bay program on that. So thank you so much. And then I see Virginia Whitmer on camera, but you had said you didn't want to say anything. Did you change your mind, Virginia?
One quick thing. I absolutely love the analogy of create, you know, constellations and not stars. I underlying all of this is how we absolutely must work together. Every individual counts, everything we do count, you know, does count, but we need to do it together.
Great. Thanks, Virginia. And thanks for all you've been doing. Virginia is a really talented graphic designer for us and has, as Steve mentioned, done so much work on our balloon campaign, the website, and our materials. Okay, so again, thank you all. And I leave it now to Avalon our Marco program director, who's been wonderful just all week. And so Avalon, I'm going to let you wrap it up completely for us.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. I just quickly will say I've learned a tremendous amount about what all of our partners are doing. People are really walking the walk, and I'm so impressed from policy to data to behavior change to commerce. Everything I've learned makes me really hopeful for a future without marine debris. So with that, in a few days, you will receive a post-meeting survey. Please do provide your insights and opinions. It helps us with our work group planning and future summit planning. Thank you again for all your questions, and to the speakers for being here today and the past 2 days. We could not have done this without you. So I'd also like to thank the hundreds of people from all over the world who joined us, the many people who put a great deal of time into the planning of this summit. Please be sure to fill out the survey, as I said, and thank you again. Let's keep working together for a cleaner ocean.
Thanks, everybody.
So long, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.